Es el sonido de la guerra. Solo que esta vez no es en Ucrania, ahora también es cada vez más común en Rusia. Los trabajadores de emergencia llegan rápidamente al lugar, a menos de 1 kilómetro del cuartel general militar del sur ruso. Esta guerra ahora llega casi todos los días a los civiles del país que la inició.
Se cayó el marco de una ventana, el cristal se hizo añicos. Me levanté y comencé a limpiar. ¿Qué más podía hacer?
Y más allá de los drones que apuntaron a Rostov-on-Don en las primeras horas del jueves, un tercero fue interceptado cuando se dirigía a Moscú, según el alcalde de la ciudad.
La gente está sufriendo a causa de la operación militar especial de Rusia en Ucrania. Dejemos que Putin venga aquí y vea lo que está pasando.
Para los civiles, mientras tanto, en Ucrania la guerra es muy familiar. Un ataque con drones rusos en la región de Odessa el miércoles, mientras los rusos atacaban infraestructura agrícola e instalaciones portuarias, por cuarto día consecutivo. Los ataques ahora empujan la guerra peligrosamente hacia el oeste, con lo que podrían ser restos de drones rusos encontrados esta semana en suelo de Rumania, miembro de la OTAN, justo al otro lado de la frontera con la región de Odessa.
No me siento seguro aquí. Estoy en la costa rumana y no me siento seguro.
Nos hemos acostumbrado a las sirenas. Durante el día las ignoramos, pero por la noche se nos tensa el alma cuando suenan.
El sonido de las sirenas y las consecuencias de esta guerra se extienden cada vez más, incluso cuando se vuelven rutinarias. Melissa Bell, CNN, Kyiv, Ucrania.
Y en la guerra en Ucrania, una nueva ola de ataques de Rusia este viernes contra diferentes regiones han dejado al menos 4 personas muertas y decenas de heridos, según las autoridades. El jefe de la administración militar de la región de Jersón comunicó a través de Telegram que dos mujeres y un hombre perdieron la vida como resultado de un ataque con misiles guiados. Varios misiles rusos, de hecho, cayeron también en el centro de Kryvyi, provocando la muerte de una persona y heridas a otras 32, según informó el jefe militar de la zona. Y aproximadamente el 90% de los prisioneros de guerra ucranianos han sido sometidos a torturas, violaciones, amenazas de violencia sexual u otras formas de trato cruel, según denunció este jueves el fiscal general de Ucrania al relator especial de la ONU sobre la tortura. El funcionario señaló que han sido identificados 156 sospechosos, de los cuales 114 han sido acusados en los tribunales. Otras 35 personas fueron condenadas por tortura y tratos crueles como crímenes de guerra. Y Ucrania ha presentado una propuesta oficial a Turquía para operar un corredor de cereales a través del Mar Negro sin la participación de Rusia, informó este jueves el embajador de Ucrania en Turquía. El diplomático apuntó que los buques de carga ucranianos ya navegan sin restricciones por las aguas territoriales de Rumanía, Bulgaria y Turquía. Y 17 personas fueron detenidas en Cuba en relación con una red de tráfico de personas que presuntamente recluta personas para combatir con Rusia en la guerra en Ucrania. Las autoridades indicaron que los presuntos reclutadores buscaban personas con antecedentes criminales. Vamos a escuchar más detalles.
Resultado de las investigaciones realizadas por los órganos del Ministerio del Interior en torno a estos hechos, se han detenido hasta el momento 17 personas, de las cuales una de ellas es la organizadora interna de estas actividades. Es la responsable de organizar internamente la actividad, apoyándose en otras 2 personas, igualmente residentes en el país, que son los que buscan a los cubanos, a las personas, a los nacionales interesados en alistarse e incorporarse a este conflicto bélico.
Yeah, Phil, so this is an excerpt of a biography written by Walter Isaacson that was obtained by my colleague Sean Lingus, and it really provides a new window into Elon Musk's thinking about Starlink's role in the war in Ukraine. Now, as you said, according to this biography, Musk did, in fact, order his engineers to turn off Starlink satellite communications for the Ukrainians when they were trying and planning to launch a sneak attack on Russia's naval fleet around Crimea. According to the biography, that was because he had spoken to Russian officials and he believed that doing so could prompt a response by Russia that was akin to a, quote, mini Pearl Harbor, and that Russia might actually respond by using nuclear weapons. And it also kind of delves into his ambivalence about using Starlink in a war setting writ large. He said, quote, "How am I in this war? Starlink was not meant to be involved in wars. It was so people can watch Netflix and chill and get online for school and do good, peaceful things, not drone strikes." Now, according to this excerpt, Ukrainian officials begged him to turn the satellites back on, and he actually had a conversation with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, about the anxieties that Washington had about Starlink's power and, of course, how he was kind of turning it off and on. But really, this just underscores how powerful Starlink is and how important Elon Musk and his services are to the U.S. government and the Ukrainian government, Phil.
Ukraine says it's making incremental gains in its southern counteroffensive. Kyiv also reporting that its Air Force destroyed 16 drones that were headed toward the Black Sea port city of Odessa this morning. But a Russian missile attack on Zaporizhia left at least one person hurt. Meantime, Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrapping up his visit to Kyiv after announcing $1 billion in new U.S. support. CNN's Katie Pugliese with us from London this morning. Hey there, Katie. So President Zelensky is saying that Ukraine is preparing more global pressure on Russia. What exactly is this likely to look like?
Well, David, he mentioned this last night in his nightly address. This is something he does every night, talking about the status of the conflict. And he said, as you mentioned, global pressure on Russia. Now, this is clearly already happening. We've been seeing this week from Blinken's visit to Kyiv that there has been quite a lot of public support for Ukraine in this war. What we do know is that Ukraine is maybe going to get more weapons. That is what Zelensky hinted at last night. But we don't know what kind of weapons. We don't know from whom. And we don't know when. But this is coming in a week of already a lot of promises of military equipment, military training, that $1 billion promise that you just mentioned from the United States, and also quite a lot of successful diplomacy from other countries as well. Just yesterday, he also had phone calls with the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also talking about security. The British, again, promising more security and more cooperation with Ukraine going forward. All of this shows the gathering of allies, the Western support around Ukraine in this war, and that is not just verbal support, that has been military equipment on the ground, desperately needed ammunition, weaponry, and clearly there is more to come.
$1 billion aid package includes depleted uranium munitions, a move that the Kremlin calls a criminal act. But I want to explain to you what exactly are depleted uranium munitions and why use them. Well, they are much denser than conventional munitions. They're also, they're so dense, in fact, they can actually pierce the armor on tanks. As for the safety of troops handling these munitions, the UN's nuclear watchdog says they are considerably less radioactive than natural uranium. When the depleted uranium hits its target, it can ignite and produce uranium dust, which can cause problems if high concentrations enter the body. Nick Robertson joins us live now with a closer look at these munitions. They're considerably less radioactive, but that doesn't mean they're not radioactive at all. They are mildly radioactive. So the onus is really on Ukraine, Nick, to use these munitions as responsibly as possible to ensure the safety of civilians.
It is, and in the context of what you were describing there, the real danger when these evaporate into dust on impact, it's the momentum and the density that allow them to, these munitions to punch through the armor and sometimes ignite as they do so, creating this really potentially harmful dust. There are other much more harmful effects for, let's say, the tank crews. This was designed back in the 70s to take on and destroy Soviet-era T-72 tanks, which is a principal tank that Ukrainian forces face. And that's when they're bringing in the British Challenger 2 tank and the new US Abrams tanks, which these depleted uranium munitions will be used from, those are going to be high among the targets when you talk about tank battles. So there is a danger to the troops in the tank. The physical harm of the disruptive nature of a massive explosion. The analysis has generally been that inhaling the sort of vaporized effect of these munitions, civilians would need to be very, very close to a very intense battle. However, when it gets into the soil, settles out into the soil, this is what we've heard from the World Health Organization, saying that where there have been concentrations of this munition used, you should look at the groundwater supplies afterwards. You should be very aware of what happens in the groundwater in those communities. And it does potentially create concern going forward. But as far as troops handling the munitions, NATO's own investigations, the IAEA, have also said that there's no significant effect. The assessment is, if you get some of this depleted uranium on your skin, or you inhale it, then probably your body's going to pass it out. But if you get it in your bloodstream, it can potentially be harmful to your kidneys. But I think it's the long-term groundwater effects that are perhaps going to be the things that Ukraine will obviously have to monitor in the future.
Right, Nick Robertson, thank you so much for breaking that down for us.